Yeah, this is Tim Keanini. I go by TK. Today's subject is going to be the Internet of Things, and I'm going to try and address it in a way that that is actionable. So, Mike Murray and I have worked together in previous lives, and I'm delighted today that he's with me. Going to share a lot of details around what he's doing in his sector related to the Internet of Things. So, you know, from a language standpoint, the term things is useful when you don't want to have to iterate over all the members of the set. But it's not that useful when you want to go about talking about something that's actionable. I mean, if we were going to talk about things, then I can just say, go do stuff to address the things, and that's speaking at the same logical level. When we're talking about things, let's just get a brief feeling for the scope here. You know, when we first started talking about securing computers back in the early days, the set that was computers consists of only several roles. There were basically desktop, laptops, and servers. And that quickly grew. Sort of the next phase of growth really came from, I guess, what got labeled BYOD, which was that was not the desktop, the traditional desktop, you know, laptop server, but all the other things like tablets and smartphones. And while those things are still growing, the numbers of everything else, which is I guess what everybody's calling the Internet of Things, the numbers are really, really staggering. I went and tried to find the most conservative number I could, and from the MIT Technology Review, they estimate 26 billion objects on the Internet, right, by 2020. And so if we do some rough math and say, hey, you know, for each one of those, you know, I'm not naive to think that things are equally distributed, but just bear with me for a little bit. Let's assume 20 to 25 vulnerabilities per, according to an HP study. That's a target surface of 650 billion, right? So there's a lot of stuff to secure. And in doing so, I want to do it in a way where I'm not overwhelmed by these numbers, but there's somewhat of a plan of action that we can all take, depending on our sector, our role, our communities. So, again, looking, you know, for a more clarity, more actionable ways to address things. If we consider that things have attackers, and then we sit to defend things, you end up with essentially a lot of categories here. Call them sectors, if you will. And the rendering of things in these sectors are very different. The operational tasks around these things in these sectors are very different. So to sort of respect the differences here, you know, today we're going to really focus on healthcare. Okay, so that's kind of a long way to set this up, but I really want to give us context because it, you know, this idea of securing everything in the universe is just going to be untenable. So, you know, when we look through the lens of these sectors, we can break them down to their applications and their architectures. And from this, we can devise some strategic defensive strategy. The other thing that's always missing from this chart are the threat actors. And frankly, the threat actors have gone about leveraging the Internet of Things themselves. So let's not forget about them. They're always at the table. We're always doing threat modeling there. And again, for sake of this conversation, let's just take the rough three categories of cybercriminals, nation state, and hacktivists. So really, you know, this talk, I'm going to kind of step out of the way here, but you know, what are the defensive strategies that people in these sectors are going to employ given this sort of 2020 problem, right? We're not really trying to design for yesterday's problem. We're really trying to get fit and ready, have a readiness for tomorrow's problem. So with that, I'm going to pass the ball over to Mike Murray, and he can take us through his strategies and things he's doing at GE. So let me pass over the ball here. All right, Mike, you got it.
Can you guys hear me now?
Hear you great.
Awesome. Sorry, I was on mute there as I started to talk. Well, that doesn't work very well. So let's just pull up my my slide deck, which is called Cleverly Building Secure Things. And it's funny because, DK, everything you said a minute ago, it's really true, and it really applies across the board. That, you know, we're both of a certain age. You know, we've been around long enough that we remember the day before there were things on the internet. The internet wasn't really a place of things, and we spend a lot of time, you know, talking about the types of things that are on the internet, and what we see a lot of is this stuff. You know, when I talk to people about Internet of Things, what I hear, hold on, I gotta hit PowerPoint. What I hear a lot about is phones, and either things that connect through phones or things that are connecting directly to the internet that are little handheld, you know, devices like the Fitbit or your, you know, your like blood pressure monitor that connects through your phone, or like my sleep sensor or things like that. But what we don't think a whole lot about is that there are big things that connect to the internet. And until I got to GE, I didn't really think about this. I thought a lot about Internet of Things, but my scope on things was pretty small. And when I got to GE, I realized that the scope on things is actually huge. And it's the big things that are actually going to have probably more of an impact than a lot of the little things. For example, you know, statistics that blew my mind, a GE jet engine over the course of a day will send back a terabyte of data to the airline and to GE about how that jet engine is performing in the sky. And that's every jet engine. We sell a lot of jet engines. There's a lot of jets. And every day we get a terabyte of data from those jets. Our MRIs and our CT scanners send back huge volumes of data to us about how those devices are performing. And similarly, our locomotives. I saw in an article recently, one of our executives was quoted as saying that what we really want to sell is access to locomotion, not physical locomotives. And part of that strategy involves making those locomotives just things on the internet, and that those things will report data so that we can tell our customers, for example, when they're going to have unplanned downtime, when the locomotive's engine is likely to need to be serviced that we didn't expect. And so if you think about things as encompassing literally everything we're putting a computer in, I mean, cars are now connected to the internet. I, for one, look forward to a self-driving car, but I know a lot of people, that idea terrifies them. And soon enough, we're going to have self-driving, you know, self-flying planes and self-driving locomotives and, you know, self-updating CT scanners. And it really corresponds to what happened when people became connected. You know, when the internet hit a certain tipping point in terms of scale, a lot of network effects took over. You know, the point of social networking in 1997 would have been pretty foolish. The point of social networking even in 2003 was pretty foolish. I had a Friendster account. TK, I imagine you had a Friendster account. Not that many people had a Friendster account. The idea of something like Facebook and social networking really didn't make sense until there was a certain, you know, a certain scale and a certain tipping point in terms of the number of machines that were connected. The usefulness of the network effects didn't take over. Well, the same thing's going to happen when we get to a certain connectivity scale with machines. Right now, the idea of my Fitbit being, you know, constantly updating the world on the number of steps I'm taking is not particularly interesting. Or, you know, one of my medical devices being connected is not really very interesting. but the idea of all of them being connected. At the point where we start to connect all the things, that's when we start to see that same kind of network effects. Unfortunately, there's a lot of problems in how we do that. You know, and regardless of whether we look at, you know, healthcare or, I mean, frankly, I included this slide about forces shaping the healthcare industry, not because I want to talk about healthcare, but because I would argue that you could insert .star there and say forces shaping .star industry, Internet of Things, intelligent machines, big data, and analytics. And almost every one of those things is affecting every industry wildly. You know, our oil and gas industry is, I was talking to the product security leader in our oil and gas business yesterday, and she was walking me through some of the things that they're connecting together. You know, the seafloor is now talking to the oil rig, which is talking to the refinery, which is talking to, you know, the company that's making the, you know, that's shipping the gas to the gas pumps. And all of this starts to communicate together. These forces are really taking everything to a world where those connected network effects are going to start to take over. And I think, you know, for any of those of you who have read Kurzweil's stuff on the singularity, I think we're closer to that idea than we may think. You know, if we were sitting looking at the internet in 1997, one might have been able to conceive of Facebook, but the idea of the impact of Facebook would have been hard for us to even dream of, because of the scale of consequences that we couldn't conceive of in terms of the number of people who connected together. The same thing's happening with machines. You know, as we connect everything together and as those things speak together more intelligently, I don't think we can even dream of what that's going to do in terms of changing our lives. Much for the better. I mean, though we complain about Facebook, and though social media has given lots of threat vectors, it's also enriched our lives, you know, and I would argue that for the most part, those kinds of network effects enrich our lives more than they punish us. But that said, there are some problems with doing this. The main problem, especially in the thing world, is that most things have long time scales and have existed for a long time, and they weren't built for the kind of world they're about to enter. You know, much as, and I used to give a lot of security awareness talks around Facebook, and one of the points that I used to make is that our brains, especially those of us who are of an age that we didn't grow up with Facebook, we didn't grow up in a world where we had to consider the aggregate of every piece of information that we put out there. You know, I might put a picture of my pet on Facebook today, and 6 weeks from now, I might enter, what's your favorite pet's name, as the security question for my bank, never thinking that the picture of my pet on Facebook just gave away the security question for my bank. Similarly, the devices that we're putting on the internet, you know, we built CT scanners in like 2003. Well, a circa 2003 CT scanner was not built to conceive of the Internet and Things in 2018. And so we have a lot of dated devices, even cars and I mean, you name it, that have been built in a world that didn't have an internet for them. And so we have a really difficult challenge with putting these things online. As well, we have to change the expectation as part of that. If you think about the way most older school, especially big products were developed, like the CT, the MR, the oil rig, the airplane engine, they were built on long time scales. You know, you have 2 or 3 year product development cycles, and then 15 to 20 year product life cycles. Well, the world has evolved. The world has changed. Every customer that I have talked to since I've been at GE Healthcare seems to think that their medical devices should act like their cell phones. They seem to believe that updating a medical device should be as simple as when they hit update all apps on their iPhone, and that everything should just keep working, and they should constantly have the newest, latest and greatest software. And I mean, honestly, I can't say I disagree with them. You know, I go to the doctor, And I'm asking my doctor, why am I still filling this out on paper? Why aren't you just giving me an iPad and I can type my information in, hand it back to you, and then you don't have to like have a medical transcription service who sits there and transcribes all this paperwork into electronic medical records. So because of the world that we're living in and what we expect just from the interaction with our day-to-day handheld devices, it's changing the way the entire industry thinks about their things, to the point that I actually recently heard a term from someone very important in the healthcare industry who said the phrase, you know how we have software-defined networking. Within 3 years, we expect to have software-defined medical devices. And that's both a wonderful promise and a very cool thing. And I don't know about any of you guys who have used a bunch of software. I don't know that I want the thing irradiating my brain to be a software-defined anything, because the reliability of software is not nearly the same as we've come to expect from the reliability of our industrial devices. And so I think we have a lot of work to do. And frankly, that amount of work is what got me to go to GE in the first place. At the same time, these manufacturers are coming up against a really important concept within Agile, and that concept is the idea of cost of delay. This is a concept that I have to admit I didn't understand until a couple of years ago. And it's one of the more important things to realize when you're building a product, is that if you wait to get your product online, all you've done is you've incurred the cost of having your team sit around at the same time as incurring the lost revenue that you would have had if you had the product on the market. And so when we talk about how do you build a secure product, one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind when we're helping build this Internet of Things is that cost of delay is probably the biggest cost we're going to have. If we say, hey, we're security folks, we want you guys to wait for 6 months while we design the security around this, that is far more costly than almost anything that we could ask our product teams or our developers or our businesses to do. And so especially as we move towards a more agile world, you know, the idea of software-defined medical devices, the idea of software-defined anything, we're moving towards a world where cost of delay effects are going to have such a huge impact that security is not going to be allowed to do the things we've always done. We've always traditionally been the organization that says, hey, hold on, before you put that out the door, we need 6 weeks of penetration testing. And we expect that in the old days, that worked. In the old days, Microsoft's SDL, which was very waterfallish, worked really well. But as cost of delay effects increase, and as cost of delay effects actually are better measured, what we're going to find is that the things that we've always done are not going to get us the results we've always had, and we can't continue to expect that we're going to find a way to get around that. So how do we do that? Well, everybody goes more agile. Everybody starts talking about agile, 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 and waterfall is the problem. This is a slide I had from recently. It's all about, you know, glorifying agile and making waterfall the problem. And I heard a phrase recently. What do you get when you take something that's traditionally built as waterfall and you try and apply agile to the waterfall build? And they call that the avalanche method. It's basically a waterfall that all falls on your head in a very agile way. Because the thing is, as we move faster and faster and faster in this Internet of Things, we have to find a way as security people to take all of this. I mean, I've literally just gone from, you know, the promise of Internet of Things to all the reasons that Internet of Things is going to be hard, especially as security folks. Because as we build this quickly and as we move this fast, the question is, how do I security around that? You know, and how do I put security into this crazy world that we're about to go to, where all the machines talk together, where everything's speaking to each other at the same time, and where we're trying to do releases upon releases upon releases at light speed, pretty much. And the real thing about that is, a lot of the things we've always done work incredibly well. There are really, if we break it down, and this is, so I was explaining this to somebody last week. Pause for a second and tell a story. I was explaining to somebody last week that one of the things that happened to me when I got to GE Healthcare, and that's happened to our team, is we have the lucky position and the unlucky position of being in one of the most complex product security organizations that I think exists on the planet. Microsoft is well known for being, you know, the folks behind SDL. The guys at Adobe are great. The guys at Google and Facebook are doing a great job. All these folks are doing a phenomenal job in terms of SDL and in terms of building their products in a secure way. But we have a challenge that I don't know exists except in other organizations like ours, anywhere else. We have products that were built, were originally designed in the late 90s that are still in production. We have products on languages that haven't existed for many years. We have products that are, you know, that require a room full of computers to put together. And then we have products that are in the cloud, that are on public cloud infrastructures, that are on microservices infrastructures, that are on mobile devices. You know, we have every kind of product and every kind of development lifecycle you've ever imagined, from the most, you know, from the most modern, fastest moving, most current environment of all, to one of the slower moving, least able to affect change environments at the same time. And if you put those two things together, you know, it's one thing to design a security development lifecycle and figure out how to do product security for one of those or many of those. To do it for all of them at the same time requires that you really break everything down to the two first principles. And what's on screen right now, the idea that there are two things about product security, and if you look at, for example, Microsoft's SDL or the other SDL documents that have been written, everyone really lumps these together, except perhaps the ISO standard, but even the ISO standard really it doesn't do a good job of distinguishing. And I say that there are two things that we need to do to secure every product. And the first one is the what of product security, the things you build into the product, the features, for lack of a better word, that you put in the product that make the product more secure, the encryption, the access control, the firewalls, what you log and where, all that kind of stuff. That's all the what of the product. And even if you do that perfectly, if you do that absolutely perfectly, you put all the right what's in there, it's still not enough, because I can put lots of encryption in there and I can get all the encryption right, and I can still write the software in such a way that I forgot to validate my inputs, and nobody tested my input validation, and I allow SQL injection attack in the login form, and suddenly all of my security has gone for naught. And the other side of the other side of the what piece is the how piece. It's the security development lifecycle. It is the actual process steps and activities that you take within the development lifecycle that make sure that while you're building the product, you have built a product in the most secure way possible. And it's really breaking that down into what and how that's allowed us to build a really flexible security development environment that can live in both that waterfall circa, you know, 1990. I made a joke at one point that we have two SDLs. We have the circa 1997 SDL, which is for those products, and we have the circa 2017 SDL, which is for the modern stuff. But they all come off of this same process map, and they look exactly the same. I mean, this process map, which is our internal security development lifecycle map, looks exactly the same as what you would see on the Microsoft website. Because in terms of the actual tasks, let's be honest, the number of tasks that change in the Internet of Things is very small. It's how you do them that changes. Because one of the other things that everyone knows, and I'm sure everyone's seen the statistics, so that basically as you go through the development lifecycle, the cost of fixing the defect becomes exponentially more expensive. one of the goals within our product security lifecycle, especially when you start talking about Agile and real Internet of Things, things on the cloud, stuff like that, when you start to build products in that world, the importance of moving the actual security discovery of security issues and detection of security issues to the left of the development lifecycle becomes magnified, especially within the context of cost of delay. If you wait longer and longer, the cost of rework, the cost of fixing the defect, the cost of everything goes up and delays the project more. If you fix it at the beginning, it doesn't. And so a lot of the cost of delay stuff comes with building things earlier on. Now, the real place that hits us as security folks, in almost every case, is at the end. We want to put the 6-week penetration test into our development organization and make everyone go through, a long review of security and all of that kind of stuff. And that's almost entirely where cost of delay hits us, right? The idea of the old 6-week penetration test, especially, if you're talking about something big, you're talking about a locomotive or a CT scanner or, you name big thing here, the idea of putting in that huge amount of penetration testing and then remediation and then final verification, it just doesn't scale. If you're talking about a continuous development environment or continuous integration environment, sorry, not development, deployment. If you're talking about continuous deployment, continuous integration, you can't ask somebody on a 15 to 30-day release cycle to do a 6-week penetration test. It just doesn't work. So what we really have to do is we have to start deconstructing that SDL and ripping the SDL into pieces so that we can take each of those pieces and move from the current way that we're doing it, within the development lifecycle, and take those pieces and break them so that they move as far to the left of that development lifecycle curve as humanly possible. The main place we do that, especially in Agile, within Agile development environments, is with the definition of ready and definition of done. And for those that don't know what that is, Agile has the concept within it of before you're able to develop a feature, that feature, you have certain things that must happen for that feature to be considered ready. Once the feature has been finished coding, you have certain things that must be finished to be considered done. And so we drive to each of our products that are using Agile development, we drive them to incorporate security activities within their definition of done and definition of ready. A lot of that also includes incorporating in your security testing. Lots of places that I've been before and clients that I've had in the past, when they were doing security testing, they would do them every few weeks, every 6 weeks, every 4 weeks within the development lifecycle, or they just wait till the end. What we're driving towards is integrating all of our tools within the development lifecycle so that every time somebody builds the product, we run the entire suite of security test tools. That way, there's never a question mark of when we do it. There's never a huge, somebody doesn't immediately integrate or go run burp scanner and find 75 new things. Those get found each time the product gets built, whether that's every night, every week, every sprint, however the product team is doing it. We're driving towards integrating those test tools into the actual definition. And apparently my slide has decided not to actually show. We had on this slide an actual definition of done checklist, but apparently somehow it got deleted. So I can show you guys that later. But the idea is basically the definition of done includes you will update your threat model and you will verify that the current project threat model actually maps to what you actually built, and you will have run all static analysis and dynamic analysis tests against your particular part of the product and make sure that they all pass. So you get the idea. The place where it gets really messy, of course, is at the end. And what we've really started to do is to deconstruct penetration testing. In Agile, they talk about the idea of having your product in an always shippable state, so that if some executive walked up to you today and said, and pressed the button and said, this product goes live now, it should be able to go live and it should work. It won't have all the features that aren't finished yet, but it will have whatever it has, it will have shippable. But no one ever talks about the idea that always shippable should also mean always secure. And so we as security folks, we want to run a bunch of last-minute security tests to make sure, especially in terms of an incredibly high-value product, we want some level of anti-hacker assurance, or as my as our leader calls it, beat the hacker. We want to know that product will beat the hacker in some way. And so usually what we do is we wait till we're about to release and go pen test it, but that doesn't work if the product's supposed to be always shippable. So what we're aiming for is always shippable, secure, right? So that means we need to figure out how to take the hacker and put them literally on every single team. You want an embedded pen tester on every team. And what that embedded pen tester's goal is instead of waiting until the product is released, and the way a pen test works is you have some badasses sit down and these brilliant hacker types sit down and look at the machine and think, how would I break this? What we want to have is that hacker embedded in each team so that as the feature is built, they say, how would I break this? And then those test cases get written as part of the test suite for the product, rather than driving towards the idea of them waiting until the end and sitting down and coming up with all the ideas for how to hack a given feature. We want them to sit down at the very middle of the development life cycle and write that into the test suite of the product. Then you can use the actual traditional hacker, the traditional pen test as a spot check, not as something that is a gate for the release, but as a spot check every few months to actually say, okay, well, we did a full pen test as well out of the development life cycle and all is still good. Of course, management doesn't like this. The idea of putting a high-end security resource on every product team can be pretty expensive. And I mean, it gets expensive fast if you think about the expense of the traditional pen tester. But the thing about it is when you start to actually think about it in terms of that hypothetical cost of delay, suppose we had a $20 million a year project. Well, the cost of delay is, on a $20 million project, it's about $480K a week. Well, you think about it, if you have a pen test that happens late in the development life cycle, and that causes even one extra week of delay that you didn't expect because you find a bunch of things that you have to go back and fix, you've then, even in 1 week, you've more than doubly justified, the cost of having that person on the team. And if, I'm pretty sure everyone that's on this call has seen at some point a pen test delay a product a month, 2 months, 3 months, because they went to do a pen test and they found some major findings that took major rework. The idea of doing this in the beginning of the development lifecycle and as each feature is built starts to really drive a whole lot of cost where that cost of delay metric has built in. If you can eliminate, even once a year, if you can eliminate a month of work on your $20 million a year product, you're talking about approximately $2 million of like lost, basically waste due to cost of delay. That's a pretty cheap pen tester if you can eliminate a lot of that. So we end up taking our Agile framework, and instead of, as you saw our waterfall version of the SDL as it's broken out, but in terms of our Agile version, it actually looks much more like this. And you see we're driving towards deconstructing that SDL into all the different parts of our Agile framework. So that's the way that we are driving towards securing all the things. I hope that everyone else is doing the same, because ultimately, frankly, in terms of cost of delay, I'm as impatient a shopper as anyone else. I am the first one to be frustrated that I didn't get my new fitness device from that I bought on Kickstarter nearly fast enough. And you know, even as a longtime security guy, if it's because they took 6 weeks for a pen test when they really could have done it earlier in the development life cycle, that frustrates me as a customer. So, TK, I don't know if you're still on and want to chat, you know, about this stuff, but I hope that was I hope there were some good thoughts there.
Yeah, awesome. Hand me back the ball, and I'll kind of take us into our question and answer section. But I do want to summarize a little bit. Yeah, when you said you were going over to GE, I thought you were nuts. Just because the problem space is just so massive. But yeah, I'm completely impressed. Let me pull up my slide. All right.
So we realize we have to. So Rich Syerson, who runs the product security org at Healthcare, who you know from our previous life, said we realize that we have such a huge problem that we have to take a real talent-first approach. Like the problem we have is so big that we have to have an incredibly strong talent base to do it, and you know, we have so many problems. It's almost unfathomable.
Right. So a couple of you know, just again sitting here as a participant and thinking about patterns. You know, the life cycle pattern is essentially a multiple opportunity pattern, right? It's whether we take advantage of it or not. So in the software development life cycle, as things are in pre-production and head toward production, you know, we see a multi-staged type of opportunity for security to be inserted, quality inserted, all of these things. The later you do it, the more expensive it gets. One can recognize this is the same pattern as the attack continuum. Look at the kill chain, look at everything in production. So even when in production, you're looking at multiple opportunities to detect the adversary in your network and to get them out. Again, you want to do that before exfiltration or before ransomware. So here we have a sort of you call it, you know, a continuous securing of development cycle. You know, we call it continuous response. And there is also a readiness there that I think everyone needs to strive for. The other pattern is this embeddedness, you know, the idea that being embedded is really the dominant strategy. You know, we believe at Lancope that turning the network into a sensor is the best way to embed. The network itself as a whole becomes auditable. You get a general ledger by which you can run analysis on and get to the detection you need. Now, very subtly, I have in bullet point number 2, I don't know if we've emphasized this enough, but much of what the growth you saw, even on the first slide, is not necessarily human-to-machine communication that we've been designing interfaces with and everything else. The majority of growth from here to 2020 is more machine-to-machine communication. Okay, so this is interesting because there will be more machine-to-machine communication in the coming years than there will be human-to-machine. So how we do authentication, how machines know each other, how machines talk to each other, and frankly, what detection methodology we choose is going to change, right? So anomaly detection turns out to be a very dominant strategy because machines are so regular in what they do that an adversary prancing around a network in much of a machine-to-machine situation is going to stick out like a sore thumb, right? So again, you know, kind of closing here, you know, strategies must be to secure things as early in the life cycle. And I think what Mike took us through was, you know, prior to even production. But when you look at DevOps and things of that nature, you know, production and development almost go hand in hand. The tempo is so fast that it's hard to distinguish one from another. And again, I'm just pointing to, you know, the reality of what is here and what is coming. So with that, I think we should open to questions and answers.